The sun hung low over the dusty outskirts of Eldridge Hollow, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 47. It was one of those late afternoons where the air shimmered with heat, the kind that made distant objects waver like mirages. 8-year-old Ethan huddled behind a rusted pickup truck in the abandoned lot, his small chest heaving with terror. He'd been playing alone, as he often did since his mom worked double shifts at the diner, when the sharp glint caught his eye, a flash of metal on the rooftop of the old grain silo across the road. It wasn't the sun reflecting off a window. It was deliberate, cold. A scope, a sniper's scope, trained not on some far-off target, but right down on the rumbling convoy approaching from the horizon. Ethan's heart pounded like a drum in his ears. The convoy was the Iron Vipers, a club of weathered riders who'd become local legends. 50 strong, their Harleys roaring in unison like thunder rolling in from the Badlands. They were heading to their annual gathering at the Hollow's edge, a ritual of brotherhood forged in the fires of old wars and harder roads. But something felt wrong. The boy froze, his fingers digging into the gravel as he watched the rider at the front, Lucas Kane, the club's grizzled leader. Lucas was a man carved from loss, his face etched with scars from a roadside blast in some forgotten desert conflict, his left arm a patchwork of tattoos hiding shrapnel wounds. He'd walked away from that life years ago, vowing to build something unbreakable with his brothers, a promise whispered over beers to a dying comrade. "We'll ride for the lost ones, always." From his hiding spot, Ethan saw the sniper adjust position, the barrel steadying. Panic clawed at the boy. His dad had told stories about the Vipers, how they'd once pulled him from a wreck on this very road, strangers becoming saviors in the dead of night. Now, those same men were in the crosshairs. Without thinking, Ethan bolted from cover, his sneakers kicking up dust as he sprinted toward the road's shoulder. "Up there!" he screamed, his voice cracking high and desperate. "On the roof! Gun, get down!" The lead bike swerved, engines snarling in protest, as Lucas threw up a fist, signaling the halt. Tires screeched, and the convoy ground to a stop in a cloud of grit and exhaust. The air filled with the acrid tang of burnt rubber and the low growl of idling motors. Lucas killed his engine first, his boots hitting the ground with a thud that echoed his resolve. He scanned the rooftop, his eyes narrowing under the brim of his weathered helmet. There, the faint silhouette against the orange sky, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. A shot cracked the air, splintering the truck's side mirror inches from where Ethan stood, shards of glass raining down like brittle rain. "Get the kid!" Lucas barked, his voice gravelly from years of dust-choked roads. 2 riders, broad-shouldered veterans named Ryan and Noah, leaped off their bikes, flanking Ethan and scooping him up like he weighed nothing. They hustled him behind the line of Harleys, forming a human wall of leather and steel. The club erupted into controlled chaos, engines revving in reverse, bikes peeling out to encircle the lot, cutting off escape routes. Lucas pulled his sidearm, an old service pistol he'd kept as a relic of promises unkept, and advanced with measured steps, his brothers fanning out like shadows. Ethan trembled in Ryan's arms, the man's tattooed forearms steady around him. "You see that, kid? You just saved our hides." The boy's wide eyes met Lucas's as the leader knelt, his scarred face softening just a fraction. "What's your name, son?" "Ethan," he whispered, wiping dirt from his cheek. I saw it, like in the movies." Lucas nodded, the weight of the moment settling on him like an old saddle. He'd lost too many to unseen threats, brothers in the sand, friends to the bottle after the war. This boy, with his shout piercing the haze, had pulled him back from the edge of another ghost. "You did good, real good. We owe you one." In that instant, a spark ignited, a vow forming unspoken. This wasn't just a close call. It was a call. The Vipers had always ridden for the forgotten, but now a child's cry had bound them to something deeper, a promise to unearth the shadows lurking in Eldridge Hollow. As the sun dipped lower, painting the silos in blood-red hues, the club secured the perimeter. Noah climbed the fire escape with the agility of a man who'd scaled worse in darker places. Rifle slung over his shoulder, he signaled down, empty nest, but footprints fresh in the dust leading to a service door. Whoever it was had fled, but not far. Lucas gathered his men in a tight circle, the boy at the center, the scent of oil and sweat mingling with the faint metallic bite of fear. "Listen up," Lucas said, his voice low but carrying like a sermon in the wind. "This ain't random. Someone's gunning for us, maybe tied to that old score from the mill shutdown. But we don't run. We ride through." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, fists bumping in silent oath. Ethan watched, mesmerized by their unity, the way strangers became family under pressure. Ryan knelt beside him. "Your shout. That changed everything, kid. You're one of us now." Night crept in, stars pricking the velvet sky as the Vipers towed the boy's bike from the lot and loaded him onto a spare seat. Lucas revved his engine, the deep rumble vibrating through the ground. They rolled out as a unit, headlights cutting the dark like beacons of defiance. But in Lucas's mind, questions burned hotter than the desert sun. Who had marked them? And what forgotten promise from his past had just roared back to life? The convoy thundered toward the hollow's heart, Ethan clinging to Ryan's back, the wind whipping his hair. He didn't know it yet, but his words had cracked open a vault of secrets. Corruption festering in the town's underbelly, a betrayal that threatened to unravel the club. For Lucas, it was redemption's whisper. Honor the boy, honor the fallen. The road ahead stretched endless, promising trials that would test every scar, every bond. As they crested the hill, the lights of Eldridge flickered below, a fragile glow against the encroaching night. Lucas glanced back at the boy, a faint smile cracking his stoic mask. This ride wasn't just survival, it was salvation, forged in the shout of a child who saw what no one else could. Word count, 872. The neon sign of the rusty spur flickered like a dying heartbeat against the starlit sky, casting erratic pools of red and blue across the gravel lot packed with Harleys. Eldridge Hollow's annual gathering was in full swing, the air thick with the symphony of laughter, clinking bottles, and the occasional backfire of an engine cooling down. Smoke from barrel fires curled upward, mingling with the earthy scent of pine from the surrounding hills and the sharp tang of spilled whiskey. Lucas Kane eased his bike into a spot at the edge of the circle, the club's formation breaking like waves receding from shore. Ethan slid off the seat behind Ryan, his small legs wobbling from the ride, eyes wide as he took in the sea of leather vests emblazoned with the Iron Viper's coiled serpent emblem. The boy clutched the spare helmet Ryan handed him, the weight of it grounding him amid the unfamiliar roar of camaraderie. Lucas dismounted with a grunt, his boots crunching on the loose stones as he scanned the faces around the fire pits. Old war buddies turned brothers, each carrying their own invisible burdens. There was Jonathan, the quiet mechanic whose hands still shook from a long-ago ambush, and Samuel, the former medic who'd patched more wounds than he could count, his eyes always searching for the next hurt. They'd all answered Lucas's call years back, drawn by that desert promise. Ride together, protect the weak, never leave a man behind. But tonight, the air hummed with unease, the sniper's shadow lingering like exhaust in the wind. "Lucas!" A voice boomed from the crowd, belonging to Alexander, the club's enforcer, a mountain of a man with a beard streaked grey from too many close calls. He clapped Lucas on the shoulder, the impact solid as an oath. "Heard the chatter on the radio. What the hell happened out there?" The group tightened around them, a natural phalanx forming as Ethan was gently herded toward a bench by Noah, who fetched him a soda from the cooler, nothing stronger, just the fizz of normalcy in a world suddenly tilted. Lucas recounted the tale in clipped sentences, his voice weaving through the crackle of flames. The flash on the silo, the boy's desperate shout, the vanished silhouette. Murmurs rippled like wind through tall grass. Anger, not panic. Ethan sat there, the cold can sweating in his hands, feeling the weight of their gazes. He wasn't used to being seen, not like this. At home it was just him and the empty fridge after Mom's shifts. Stories of his absent dad fading like old photographs. But here, among these strangers forged in fire, his words had summoned them from the brink. "You got guts, kid," Jonathan said, kneeling to eye level, his grease-stained fingers gentle as he ruffled Ethan's hair. "Spotting that from the lot. Most grown men wouldn't." The boy managed a nod, the praise warming him like the fire's glow. Ryan chuckled beside him, pulling out a worn deck of cards. "Want to learn a trick? Keeps the mind sharp on long rides." As the cards shuffled, Ethan glimpsed the intricate tattoo on Ryan's wrist. A faded emblem of a fallen soldier, a reminder of promises etched in skin. But Lucas's mind raced ahead, piecing shadows. The sniper wasn't some lone drifter. The precision screamed intent, tied to the rot, eating at Eldridge's core. Whispers had circulated for months. The town's mill, shuttered under shady dealings, now a front for something darker, smugglers peddling influence, backed by crooked officials who'd once been allies. Lucas had steered clear, honoring a vow to his dying brother in the sands. No more blood for causes that weren't pure. Yet here it was, knocking at his door. He stepped away from the fire, pulling Alexander aside into the cooler shadows of the bar's overhang, where the scent of stale beer clung to the wooden slats. Tracks led to the service door, Lucas murmured, his breath visible in the chill night air. Fresh. Someone local, I'd bet. Remember that deal with Mayor Harlan's crew? The one we walked from last spring? Alexander's jaw tightened, his eyes reflecting the distant headlights of late arrivals. Harlan, a slick operator with a badge for a shield, had pressured the Vipers to escort shipments from the mill, promising protection in return. They'd refused, citing the old code. No hand in corruption that hurt the innocent. Now it smelled like payback, a vendetta aimed at dismantling what they'd built. "We ride smart," Alexander replied, his voice a low rumble. "Scout the mill at dawn. If it's them, we expose it clean, no guns blazing." Lucas nodded, the decision settling like gravel under tires. But doubt gnawed. What if the boy was collateral? A pawn in a game too big for one shout to unravel. He glanced back at Ethan, now laughing as Noah demonstrated a card flourish, the firelight dancing on their faces. That innocence had pierced the club's armor, reminding Lucas of his own lost youth, stolen by explosions and regrets. He'd promised his brother to safeguard the light in the dark. Failing now would echo those desert ghosts forever. As the night deepened, the gathering shifted to stories around the flames. Tales of roads less traveled, brothers pulled from wrecks, vows renewed under starry skies. Ethan listened, mesmerized, the soda forgotten as he absorbed the rhythm of their world. Loyalty not by blood, but by choice. Ryan leaned in. "Your mum know you're out this late?" The boy shook his head, a flicker of worry crossing his face. "She works till close. I was supposed to be home by dark." Lucas overheard, his resolve hardening. "We'll get you back safe, son. And tomorrow. You stick close if you want. We've got questions, and a sharp eye like yours might spot more than scopes." Ethan beamed, the weight of belonging easing the fear. But as the embers died to coals, a distant engine growl cut the quiet. Not the clubs, but something stealthier, circling the perimeter like a predator scenting blood. In the bar's dim interior, Lucas poured a black coffee, the steam rising like unspoken warnings. He pulled out an old photo from his vest pocket, his brother, grinning beside a bike in fatigues, the promise scrawled on the back, "Ride true for all." The sniper's threat had awakened it, demanding action. Outside, the Vipers bedded down in tents and trucks, watches set in rotating shifts. Ethan curled up on a blanket near the fire, Ryan's jacket draped over him, dreaming of engines and heroes. Dawn would bring the ride to the mill, a confrontation veiled in mist. Lucas stared into the night, the town's lights winking mockingly. The boy's shout had saved them once. Now, it bound them to justice's unforgiving path. Honor demanded they uncover the truth, redeem the shadows, before the next flash turned salvation to sorrow. The road whispered promises of trials ahead, testing every scar, every bond, in the quiet hours before the storm. Mist clung to the valleys like a shroud, as the first light of dawn pierced the horizon, turning the hills of Eldridge Hollow into silhouettes etched in pale gold. The iron Vipers moved like ghosts through the pre-dawn chill, their engines muted to a low purr that blended with the waking birdsong and the distant hum of the river. Lucas Kane led the vanguard on his battered Harley, the throttle steady under his grip, the cool leather of his gloves creaking with each twist. Behind him rode Alexander and Noah, their bikes forming a tight wedge, while Ryan stayed back at the rusty spur with Ethan, the boy still rubbing sleep from his eyes under the watchful gaze of Jonathan and Samuel. The plan was simple. Scout the old mill, trace the sniper's trail, uncover the rot without stirring the hornet's nest. But simplicity was a luxury Lucas hadn't known since the sands, where every shadow hid a promise broken. The road to the mill wound through forgotten orchards, apple trees heavy with unripe fruit that bobbed in the breeze, releasing a faint, sweet decay into the air. Lucas's mind replayed the night, Ethan's shout echoing like a clarion, the club's murmurs around the fire, the unspoken vow tightening their ranks. That boy had cracked open something in him, a reminder of the child he'd been before the blasts and the losses. Before the promise to his brother became the club's creed, protect the innocent, stand against the tide of corruption. Harlan's name lingered in his thoughts, the mayor's oily smile from that spring meeting flashing like a warning light. The Vipers had turned down his offer, refusing to ferry shadows through the mill's loading docks. Now it seemed the shadows had teeth. They crested the final rise, the mill looming ahead, a skeletal giant of rusted girders and boarded windows, its silo piercing the fog like a sentinel. The air grew heavier here, laced with the metallic tang of stagnant water from the nearby creek and the faint, oily residue of machinery, long silent. Lucas signaled a halt at the tree line, killing his engine with a soft sigh. The trio dismounted, boots sinking into the damp earth, and advanced on foot, weapons holstered but senses razor-sharp. Alexander took point, his massive frame weaving through the underbrush with surprising grace, while Noah flanked left, his medic's eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance. Footprints, fresh, boot-sized, marred the mud near the service door, leading inside like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale turned grim. Lucas knelt, tracing the tread with a calloused finger, the soil cool and yielding under his touch. "Same as the silo," he murmured, the words barely audible over the rustle of leaves. No blood, no signs of struggle, just the quiet evidence of intent. They slipped through the door, the hinges groaning like a reluctant confession, into the mill's cavernous belly. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, filtering through cracked panes, illuminating stacks of forgotten crates stamped with generic labels. Hardware supplies. But Lucas knew better. The air hummed with deception, the faint scent of chemicals not meant for nails or wire. Deeper in, they found the nest, a makeshift perch atop a catwalk overlooking the main floor. Empty shell casings glinted on the grated metal, and a discarded thermos still warm to the touch. Alexander picked it up, sniffing the bitter dregs of coffee laced with something sharper, perhaps nerves or resolve. "Professional," he grunted, passing it to Lucas, "not some kid with a grudge. This was planned." Noah peered over the edge. his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom to reveal tire tracks in the sawdust below, wide from a van or truck vanishing into a loading bay shrouded in shadow. Lucas's pulse quickened, a familiar tension coiling in his chest like the serpent on his vest. This wasn't just a shot at the club, it was a message aimed at dismantling the one force in Eldridge that wouldn't bend to Harlan's web. He thought of Ethan, safe but marked now, his innocent eyes reflecting the club's fire-lit stories. The boy had become their talisman, a living echo of the promise to ride for the lost, but involving him deeper. That treaded dangerous ground, blurring the line between protection and peril. "We need proof," Lucas said, voice steady as he pocketed a casing. "Something to drag this into the light without pulling triggers." A faint clatter echoed from the far end, metal on concrete, deliberate yet hurried. The three froze, breaths held in the dusty silence. Alexander motioned forward, leading them down a spiral stair that creaked under their weight, the sound amplified like footsteps in a dream. They emerged into the loading bay, where the tracks converged on a side exit. There, half hidden behind a pallet of crates, lay a satchel, abandoned in haste, its flap open to reveal maps of the town's outskirts, marked with viper roots, and a crumpled note. "Finish the ride. H. Harlan." The name hit like a gut punch, confirming the venom. Lucas's scarred hand clenched around the paper, the ink smudged but unmistakable. Corruption wasn't abstract anymore. It wore a familiar face, one that had shaken hands in false brotherhood. Rage simmered, tempered by the old vow. No vengeance, only justice, the kind that healed rather than scarred. Noah snapped photos with a small camera from his pack. The shutters click a quiet vow of their own. "This goes to the right ears," he said. "State watchers, maybe. Clean it out from the roots." But as they retraced their steps, a low rumble vibrated through the ground, not thunder but engines approaching from the mill's rear. Headlights pierced the fog, three vehicles closing in, unmarked sedans, their forms sleek and predatory. Lucas waved his men back into cover, hearts pounding in unison. "Ambush," he whispered, the word tasting of betrayal. The cars halted, doors slamming like judgments, and figures emerged, silhouettes in dark coats, one barking orders with Harlan's clipped tone, carrying on the wind. "Spread out. They can't have gone far." The mayor's voice, laced with false authority, sent a chill deeper than the mist. Alexander gripped his handlebars instinctively, but Lucas laid a hand on his arm, steady, unyielding. No shots. Not yet. This was the ethical precipice. Confront the corruption head-on, expose it with evidence, or let the shadows swallow them whole. The vipers melted into the tree line. Bikes started with muffled roars, slipping away like smoke before the search could tighten. Back at the rusty spur, as the sun climbed higher, Lucas burst into the lot, the satchel slung over his shoulder. Ethan jumped up from the bench where Ryan had been teaching him knot tying with paracord, the boy's face alight with questions. "Did you find him?" he asked, voice small but fierce. Lucas knelt, meeting those eyes, the weight of the morning's discoveries pressing down. "We found tracks, kid, and a name, but your shout started this, keeps us one step ahead." Ryan stood, sensing the shift. As the club gathered anew, Jonathan fired up the coffee pot, the aroma grounding them, while Samuel checked the perimeter with practiced calm. Lucas spread the maps on a makeshift table of crates, the group leaning in, the air thick with resolve. "Harlan's playing dirty," he explained, his tone measured, weaving fact with the moral thread that bound them. "Tied to the mill's secrets, things that hurt folks like your mom, Ethan. We ride to uncover it all, make it right." The boy nodded, a spark of determination mirroring Lucas's own. In that moment, the club expanded, Ethan's presence a bridge between generations of guarded hearts. But doubt flickered. Harlan's reach was long, his allies embedded deep. One wrong move, and the promise could shatter. As the sun burned away the mist, engines revved in preparation for the next leg, a deeper dive into the town's veins, chasing justice with the precision of a well-aimed scope. The road ahead promised confrontations not of bullets, but of truths long buried, testing loyalties forged in fire and a child's unyielding cry. The sun climbed higher, bleaching the mist from the valleys and turning the rusty spur's gravel lot into a patchwork of harsh light and lingering shadows. The iron vipers clustered around the crates, serving as their war table. The maps from the satchel spread out like veins, pulsing with secrets. Lucas Kane traced a finger along the marked routes, the paper crinkling under his touch, while the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the earthy bite of dew evaporating from the tents. Ethan perched on an overturned bucket nearby, his small hands fidgeting with a length of paracord Ryan had given him, eyes darting between the adults' faces. The boy's presence grounded them, a quiet anchor in the brewing storm, his shout from the day before still echoing in their resolve like a vow etched in stone. Alexander leaned in, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over the central marking, the mill's loading bay, now circled in red ink. Harlan's not just barking orders, he's got eyes everywhere. Those sedans, town plates, unmarked but registered to the precinct. His voice rumbled low, carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too many ambushes turn brother against brother. Noah nodded, slipping the camera's memory card into a protective case, the plastic snapping shut with finality. Photos are gold, but we need more. Witnesses, ledgers, something to tie his hands without a fight. Samuel, ever the healer, passed around tin mugs of steaming brew, his steady gaze flicking to Ethan. Kid's got a nose for trouble. Maybe he saw something else out there playing in that lot. Lucas straightened, the sun glinting off his scarred knuckles as he folded the maps. The evasion at the mill had been clean, bikes slipping through the back trails like whispers in the wind. But the close call lingered, a metallic tang of adrenaline still sharp in his throat. Harlan's voice on the breeze had stirred old ghosts, the mayor's false camaraderie during that spring refusal, the subtle threats veiled as jokes. Lucas had walked away then, honoring the desert promise to his brother. No deals with devils, only rides for the pure-hearted. But now, with Ethan's life tangled in the web, inaction felt like betrayal. We split up, he decided, his tone brooking no argument. Alexander, you and Jonathan hit the archives in town, old mill records, anything on Harlan's holdings. Noah, Samuel, check the creekside, see if those tracks lead to a drop point. Ryan, you and me take the boy home, but eyes open. His mom's at the diner, we loop her in subtle. Ethan's head snapped up, the paracord slipping from his fingers to coil on the ground like a serpent at rest. Home, but I want to help. His voice cracked with the plea of a child tasting purpose, the firelit stories of the night before, fueling a spark Lucas recognized all too well, the hunger to stand tall against the dark. Ryan ruffled the boy's hair, his tattooed arm a pillar of reassurance. You're helping by staying sharp, kid. Spot anything off on the way, you shout it loud. The group murmured approval, fists bumping in a ritual of unity, the air humming with the quiet power of chosen kin. These men, scarred by wars and roads alike, had found family in the rumble of engines. Now Ethan's innocence wove him into their tapestry, a thread of redemption pulling them forward. They mounted up in pairs, the Harleys coughing to life with throaty growls that scattered birds from the pines. Lucas rode point with Ethan behind him, the boy's arms wrapped tight around his waist, the wind carrying the faint scent of pine sap and exhaust as they peeled out toward the diner's edge-of-town glow. The road unspooled like a film reel, cracked asphalt flanked by wildflowers nodding in the breeze, but Lucas's senses stayed wired, scanning rear views for tails. Ethan pressed his cheek against the leader's back, the vibration of the engine syncing with his heartbeat. "Why's the mayor after you?" he asked over the rush, his words muffled but insistent. Lucas paused, the question piercing like shrapnel. Old debts, son. Harlan wants control over the mill, the town, folks like your mum scraping by. We said no, 'cause promises mean something. Like the one I made to a brother long gone, ride right, protect what's good. The boy absorbed it, silent for miles, until the diner's neon flickered ahead, its open sign buzzing like a weary heartbeat. They pulled into the lot, the scent of frying grease and coffee wafting out as the lunch rush thinned. Inside, the place was a time capsule of checkered floors and vinyl booths, the jukebox humming a forgotten country tune about lost highways. Ryan stayed outside, engine idling, while Lucas ushered Ethan through the door, the bell jingling like a cautious warning. Behind the counter, Ethan's mom, Grace, her name stitched on her apron, wiped down the formica with practiced strokes, her face lined from shifts that blurred into nights. She looked up, surprise softening to relief as her son rushed into her arms. "Ethan, where have you been? I was worried sick." Her eyes flicked to Lucas, wary but appraising the leather vest and the quiet authority in his stance. "Ma'am," Lucas said, removing his helmet under the fluorescent hum. "Name's Lucas Kane. Your boy's a hero today. Spotted trouble that could have ended bad for us. We brought him safe." Grace's brow furrowed, pulling Ethan closer, the scent of her floral shampoo clashing with the diner's oil. As Lucas explained in hushed tones, the sniper, the shout, the shadows without naming Harlan outright, her expression shifted from confusion to a dawning steel. She'd heard the whispers, the mill's revival, promises that never materialized, rents hiking under Harlan's influence. "He's always had eyes like his dad," she murmured, glancing at Ethan with a mix of pride and ache. "That man rode with folks like you once before. Well, before he couldn't." The words hung, a bridge to Lucas's own losses, the promise to his brother echoing in her unsaid grief. Ethan tugged her sleeve. "Mom, they're good. Like family." Grace nodded slowly, her hand finding Lucas's in a brief clasp, calluses meeting calluses. "Thank you. If there's more, you tell me. We look out for our own here." Outside, Ryan signaled, a black sedan cruising slow past the lot, windows tinted like secrets. Lucas's jaw set, the ethical coil tightening, expose Harlan without dragging innocence under. They said goodbyes quick, Ethan promising to stay inside as the bikes roared back to life. Reuniting at a roadside pull-off by noon, the group compared notes under the shade of a lone oak, its leaves rustling like whispers of warning. Alexander and Jonathan had unearthed deeds, Harlan's shell company owning the mill, permits fudged for storage that smelled of contraband. Noah and Samuel traced the creek to a hidden cache, crates half buried, labels peeled to reveal nothing, but the disturbed earth screamed recent use. "It's a pipeline," Noah said, wiping mud from his boots. "Not just guns, influence, favors. Harlan's building an empire on lies." Lucas absorbed it, the pieces forming a noose around the town's throat. But doubt crept in. Confronting the mayor meant navigating corrupted badges, risks to Grace and Ethan that twisted his gut. The desert vow demanded justice, not recklessness, truth as the blade, loyalty as the shield. As the sun beat down, casting dappled patterns on their faces, a plan coalesced. Infiltrate Harlan's office that night, under cover of a town council distraction. Ethan's shout had ignited this. Now, the vipers would fan it to light the dark. Yet as they revved toward the shadows of evening, a radio crackle broke through, Ryan's voice tense. "Sedan's back, and it's not alone." The road ahead narrowed, promising clashes not of iron, but of wills, where one wrong turn could shatter the fragile honor binding them all. If this story's gripping you, hit that like button below. It helps these tales of grit and heart reach more riders on the road. The afternoon sun slanted through the oak's branches like shards of fractured glass, dappling the pull-off's cracked pavement where the iron vipers had gathered. Lucas Kane's radio crackled again, Ryan's voice slicing through the static like a knife edge. 2 more sedans now, boxing us in from the east, tinted windows, no plates visible. They're herding. The words hung in the heavy air, laced with the scent of sun-baked earth and the faint, acrid whiff of overheated engines from their idling Harleys. Lucas's grip tightened on the handlebars, the leather of his gloves creaking as he scanned the horizon, where the road dipped into a shallow ravine flanked by scrub brush and twisted junipers. This wasn't coincidence. Harlan's web was tightening, the mare's reach extending like shadows at dusk. Alexander revved his bike once, a low warning growl that echoed off the hills, while Noah pocketed the memory card with a nod of grim resolve. "We don't scatter," Lucas said, his voice steady as the rumble beneath him, carrying the weight of old oaths. The desert promised to his brother pulsed in his veins, no fleeing shadows, only facing them with the light of truth. But Ethan lingered in his thoughts, safe at the diner with Grace, yet vulnerable as a spark in dry tinder. The boy's shout had pulled them from the sniper's sight. Now, it demanded they shield him from the fallout, honoring the fragile family forming around his courage. Pair up, take the ravine trail, lose them in the twists, then circle back to the spur by twilight. No heroics, just outride the storm. The group split with practiced precision, engines snarling to life in a symphony of defiance that scattered dust devils across the lot. Lucas led with Jonathan flanking his left, their bikes leaning into the descent, tires biting into the gravel shoulder as the sedans crested the rise behind them. The chase unfolded like a slow burn reel, black cars weaving through the straights, headlights flashing in futile aggression, but the Vipers knew these backroads like scars on their own skin. Wind whipped through Lucas's beard, carrying the sharp tang of sage and the metallic bite of fear sweat under his vest. He glanced in the mirror, seeing Jonathan's determined profile, the mechanic's hands steady on the grips, despite the tremor from old ghosts. They'd ridden through worse, ambushes in foreign dust, betrayals that tested blood bonds. But this felt personal, a corruption gnawing at the heart of their chosen home. Deeper into the ravine, the path narrowed, walls of red rock rising like silent sentinels, their surfaces etched with ancient petroglyphs that seemed to watch the pursuit. A sedan surged close, its grille looming in the mirror like a predator's maw. But Lucas cut sharp into a hidden switchback, the Harley protesting with a screech of rubber on stone. Jonathan matched him, the 2 bikes dancing through the turns, engines harmonizing in a roar that drowned the pursuers' horns. One car fishtailed, slamming brakes in a cloud of grit, while the others hung back, cautious now, as if weighing the cost of escalation. Lucas's mind raced ahead. Harlan's men, likely locals with badges tucked away, enforcing a mayor's vendetta without the mess of open conflict. It twisted the knife, justice perverted into pursuit, loyalty bought with whispers and threats. They burst from the ravine onto a forgotten logging trail, the air cooling as pines thickened the canopy, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. The sedans faded in the distance, engines whining in frustration, but Lucas didn't ease up until the trail widened into a clearing, ringed by wild berry bushes, heavy with unripe fruit. He killed the motor, the sudden silence amplifying the distant echo of their escape, birdsong resuming like an uneasy truce. Jonathan dismounted, wiping his brow with a forearm tattooed in faded script, "Ride true." "Close one," he muttered, eyes scanning the tree line. "A Harlan's pushing hard. If he's mobilizing like this in daylight, night's gonna be a gauntlet." Lucas nodded, pulling a canteen from his saddlebag, the cool water tasting of iron and relief as it soothed his parched throat. The evidence burned in his pocket, the maps, the note, the photos, a moral compass pointing toward confrontation. But doubt coiled like smoke. Infiltrating Harlan's office meant risking the club's fragile code, the promise to protect without becoming the monsters they fought. He thought of Ethan again, the boy's wide eyes at the diner, Grace's calloused hand in his, her quiet strength mirroring the women who'd held families together through wars and woes. They were the unspoken heart of Eldridge, the innocence Harlan's empire crushed underfoot. "We adapt," Lucas said, capping the canteen with a click. "Get word to the others. Rally at the old bridge by dusk. We'll need every eye sharp for the office run." As they pushed on, the trail merging back to the main road under a sky streaked with the first hints of evening amber, Lucas's radio buzzed once more. Noah's voice this time, clipped and urgent. "Cash confirmed. More crates sealed tight. Smells like payoff drops for the council, but we got company pulling up, heading your way." The pieces aligned, Harlan's corruption, a tangled root system feeding on the town's veins. Rigged bids, silenced voices, the mill as a hub for favors that poisoned the well. Lucas's resolve hardened, the scars on his arm itching like a reminder of battles won through grit, not guns. This ride wasn't vengeance, it was redemption, fulfilling the vow to his brother by dragging lies into the light, shielding the Ethans of the world from shadows that preyed on the overlooked. Twilight painted the hills in bruised purples as the vipers reconvened at the old bridge. A rusted span over the creek where water chuckled softly against mossy stones. Alexander arrived first, his bike caked in mud from a parallel evasion, followed by Samuel and Noah, their faces etched with the day's toll. Ryan rolled in last, the diner's detour etched in his tense posture. "Boy's fine," he reported, dismounting with a thud. "Grace has him inside, doors locked. Told her to keep low. Sedan circled twice, but backed off when I revved." The group formed a loose circle, the bridge's creak underscoring their murmurs, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and lingering exhaust. Lucas laid it out under the fading light, the maps unrolled on the bridge's railing, shadows lengthening like fingers pointing to Harlan's office downtown. "Tonight, we slip in quiet. Distraction at the council hall, me and Alexander through the back. Grab ledgers, any ties to the mill. Noah, you monitor from the van. Samuel and Jonathan, perimeter watch. Ryan, stay with the boy if needed, but eyes on the diner." Nods rippled through, fists clasping in silent pact, the chosen family's bond a bulwark against the encroaching night. Ethan had unwittingly woven himself into it, his shout a catalyst for this stand, reminding them that honor wasn't forged in isolation, but in the quiet acts that preserved the light. But as engines hummed to life, preparing to ghost into town, a low fog rolled up from the creek, veiling the road ahead. Distant headlights pierced it, not sedans, but something heavier. A truck's silhouette rumbling from the mill's direction. Lucas's hand hovered near his vest, the ethical precipice sharpening. Push forward into the heart of the beast or pull back to regroup. The promise demanded the former, loyalty the risk. With a final glance at the stars emerging like hesitant allies, they rolled out, the bridge fading behind them, the night promising revelations that could redeem or unravel them all. The rumble of their departure blended with the creek's murmur, a symphony of defiance in the gathering dark. The fog thickened as the iron vipers ghosted into Eldridge Hollow's underbelly, their engines throttled to a whisper that blended with the night's hush. Streetlights cast hazy halos on the rain-slicked pavement, turning the town's main drag into a labyrinth of muted glows and deep pockets of shadow. Lucas Kane rode at the rear of the split formation, his Harley purring like a predator on the prowl, the cool mist beading on his visor and tracing icy paths down his neck. The plan burned in his mind. Distraction at the council hall with a feigned breakdown, Jonathan's truck sputtering loudly enough to draw the night watch, while he and Alexander slipped into Harlan's office through the alley access. Noah's van idled a block away, its tinted windows a vantage for surveillance, Samuel and Ryan covering the flanks. Ethan stayed locked down at the diner with Grace. Her quiet resolve a silent prayer in Lucas's thoughts. The boy's shout still the spark that fueled this shadowed ride. They peeled off at the fork, the group fracturing like smoke in the wind. Lucas and Alexander cut into the alley behind the municipal building, the air heavy with the damp rot of overflowing dumpsters and the faint briny tang of the nearby creek. Boots scraped softly on the gravel as they dismounted, helmets tucked under arms, the building's back door looming like a reluctant confessor. Padlocked, but Jonathan had slipped them a key from his mechanic's kit earlier, borrowed from a loose hinge during a routine town repair. Alexander worked it with steady hands, the lock clicking open with a metallic sigh that echoed too loudly in the stillness. "Eyes sharp," Lucas murmured, his scarred fingers brushing the pistol at his hip, not for drawing, but for the weight of reminder, the desert vow echoing. Truth over lead, honor over haste. Inside, the corridor stretched dim and narrow, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead like trapped insects, casting elongated shadows that danced with their cautious steps. The scent of stale coffee and printer ink clung to the walls, mingled with the musty undertone of files long ignored. Harlan's office door stood ajar at the end, a sliver of lamplight spilling out like spilled blood, suggesting the mayor's late hours or a trap left baited. Lucas signaled a pause, heart thudding a measured rhythm against his ribs, memories of desert patrols flooding back, the quiet before the blast, brothers lost to unseen snares. Alexander pressed against the wall, his massive frame coiled, breath fogging faintly in the chill air. They listened, the scratch of a pen, a chair creaking, then surged forward, silent as oaths unspoken. The door eased open on oiled hinges, revealing Harlan at his desk, back to them, hunched over papers under the green-shaded lamp. The room was a sanctum of polished oak and framed accolades, the air thick with cigar smoke that curled lazily toward the ceiling fan's lazy spin. Lucas's gaze swept the space. Filing cabinets lined one wall, a safe glinting in the corner, and on the desk, a ledger open to columns of numbers that screamed evasion, transfers from the mill to offshore shells, names of council cronies penciled in margins. Harlan stiffened, sensing the shift in the air, but before he could turn, Alexander's boot nudged the door shut with a soft thud. "Evening, Mayor," Lucas said, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the weight of roads travelled and promises kept. "Lights out for secrets tonight." Harlan spun in his chair, his face paling under the jowls, eyes widening like a cornered fox's. No gun on him, just a tumbler of amber liquid sweating rings on the blotter. "Cane," he rasped, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the scent of bourbon sharp between them. "Riding uninvited. That's not your style." But Lucas saw the flicker, the calculation, the bluff crumbling like dry earth under tires. Alexander flanked the desk, his presence a wall of leather and resolve, while Lucas advanced, snatching the ledger with deliberate calm. Pages flipped under his fingers, dates aligning with the mill's shipments, payoffs to the sniper's likely handlers, even a scribbled note on viper routes marked for deterrence. It was the vein, pulsing with the town's corruption. Harlan's empire built on the backs of folks like Grace, scraping by while he peddled shadows. "You thought a scope on the road would scatter us?" Lucas pressed, his tone laced with the moral steel forged in loss, the promise to his brother a fire in his chest. "That boy's shout beat your aim. Now this, ledger's tying you to the mill's poison. We walk with proof. Or you talk, make it right before it buries you." Harlan's laugh was brittle, hands splaying on the desk as if anchoring himself. "Proof? You bikers think you're saints. I built this town while you chased ghosts in the sand. The mill's just business, protection for the weak, like that diner widow." But his eyes darted to the safe, betraying the lie, the ethical rot exposed in that glance. Power over people, loyalty auctioned to the highest bidder. Alexander cracked his knuckles, the sound like gravel shifting, but Lucas held up a hand, steady, unyielding. No violence. That was Harlan's game, not theirs. The radio in Lucas's vest buzzed faintly. Noah's whisper, "Distraction holding, perimeter clear, but a patrol circling blocks out." Time tightened like a noose. Harlan leaned forward, voice dropping to a hiss. "You expose me, you expose them all, cops, council, the boy's mom, she'll lose everything." The threat landed like shrapnel, twisting Lucas's gut, Ethan's face flashing in his mind, the innocence that had saved them now a target. But doubt yielded to resolve. The vow demanded more than silence. "We ride for the forgotten," Lucas replied, pocketing a flash drive from the desk. "Backups, likely. You hurt them, we end this clean. State eyes, full light. Your choice ends tonight." Harlan slumped, the fight leaching from him like air from a punctured tire, but not before his hand twitched toward a desk drawer. Alarm button, perhaps. Alexander lunged, pinning the arm with iron grip, the struggle brief and muffled, a grunt escaping the mare's lips. They bound him loosely with zip ties from Noah's kit, not for harm but containment, the room's air now charged with the sweat of confrontation. Lucas rifled the safe. More documents, a burner phone with texts to the sniper's alias, each piece a nail in the coffin of lies. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, muffling the distant wail of the distraction's fake breakdown, Jonathan's truck belching smoke in theatrical protest. As they slipped out the back, ledger and drive secured, Harlan's muffled curses fading behind the closing door, Lucas felt the weight settle. Not triumph, but the sober gravity of justice's edge. The Vipers reconvened in the alley, bikes humming to life under the sodium lamp's eerie glow, the mist swirling like exhaled breaths of relief. Ryan's voice crackled over the radio. "Diner secure. Boys asking for you, Lucas. Says the shout's just the start." A faint smile cracked the leader's stoic mask, the chosen family's bond pulling tighter, Ethan's cry weaving redemption through their scars. But as they rolled toward the creek bridge, headlights pierced the fog from the east, patrol cars, sirens silent but closing fast. Harlan's web thrashed in its death, promising one final stand before dawn broke the shadows. The road curved into uncertainty, engines roaring the promise of truths unveiled, loyalties unbroken in the night's unforgiving embrace. The fog clung to the asphalt like a reluctant confession as the iron vipers burst from the alley, their Harleys slicing through the mist with low, urgent growls that vibrated through the night. Lucas Kane led the pack, the stolen ledger and flash drive burning a hole in his vest pocket. Their weight, a tangible anchor to the justice they'd clawed from Harlan's grasp. Headlights from the pursuing patrol cars pierced the haze behind them, silent but relentless, blue and red strobes flickering like distant lightning on the horizon. The air whipped cold against his face, carrying the sharp scent of wet pavement and pine sap from the encroaching woods. The engine's rumble syncing with the pounding of his heart, a rhythm forged in desert nights and roads that demanded more than survival. Alexander rode tight on his flank, the enforcer's massive frame leaning into the curves, while Noah's van brought up the rear, its bulk shielding the group from the closing gap. Samuel and Jonathan peeled off earlier, looping through side streets to draw heat, their distractions buying precious minutes in this ethical chase. No shots fired, no blood spilled, just the unyielding pursuit of truth over tyranny. Lucas's mind raced ahead to the creek bridge, their rally point, where Ryan waited with eyes on the diner. Ethan's face haunted him, the boy's unfiltered courage, that rooftop shout piercing the sniper's veil, binding a child to men who'd lost too much to forget what innocence cost. The promise to his brother echoed louder now. Ride for the lost, illuminate the shadows, redeem the scars that bound them. The patrol cars surged closer, tires hissing on the slick road, their sirens finally wailing to life. a shrill cry that shattered the night's hush and echoed off the hills like a judgment call. Lucas twisted the throttle, the Harley responding with a throaty surge, veering onto the old logging trail that snaked parallel to the main drag. Branches clawed at the fog, releasing bursts of earthy dampness, the path narrowing to a gauntlet of ruts and roots that tested every bond. One cop car attempted the turn, fishtailing wildly before slamming brakes, gravel spraying like brittle sparks. The other held, driver gunning it with reckless abandon. But the Vipers knew this terrain, the twists where light failed and loyalty shone. "Bridge in sight!" Alexander shouted over the wind, his voice gravelly against the roar. Lucas nodded, spotting the rusted span ahead, its silhouette a beacon in the swirling mist. Ryan's bike idled there, a lone sentinel under the creek's murmuring veil, the water's chill rising like a cool breath. They thundered across, the structure groaning under the weight, planks vibrating with the passage of steel and resolve. Noah's van followed, blocking the trail's mouth just as the remaining patrol crested the rise, lights bathing the scene in erratic pulses. Ryan revved once, a warning thunder, and the cops halted at the edge. Engines idling uncertainly, radios crackling with hesitant commands. Lucas killed his motor, boots hitting the damp earth with a solid thud, the sudden quiet amplifying the creek's soft rush and the distant wail fading into echoes. The group dismounted in a tight circle, breaths fogging in the chill, the air thick with the metallic tang of adrenaline and the faint loamy scent of moss. "They won't cross," Ryan said, helmet under his arm, his eyes scanning the fog-shrouded lights. "Harlan's orders? Scare, not engage. But we've got what we need." He jerked his chin toward the diner, visible as a warm glow a mile off. Where Grace and Ethan waited, the boys shout, the unspoken thread pulling them through. Noah extracted the drive, syncing it quickly to a burner laptop in the van, the screen's blue glow illuminating his focused face. Files cascaded, emails tying Harlan to the mill's contraband, payoffs to the sniper, a disgraced deputy with a grudge, and council votes greased for silence. "Ironclad," Noah murmured, the keys clicking like final judgments. Lucas absorbed it, the evidence a moral hammer, ready to shatter the mayor's facade without a single blow. Doubt flickered. Harlan's threats against Grace, the web that ensnared good men, but the desert vow steadied him. Justice wasn't vengeance, it was the quiet honor of standing firm, protecting the fragile lights like Ethan's. Sirens swelled again in the distance, more cars converging, but the Vipers were already moving, bikes humming back to life. They rode the creek's edge, a shadowed vein through the woods, emerging near the diner's lot under the moon's pale watch. Grace met them at the door, her apron askew, Ethan peeking from behind her skirt, his small face alight with a mix of fear and fire. "You made it!" she whispered, pulling the door wider, the warmth of coffee and pie spilling out like an embrace. Inside, under the jukebox's soft hum, the boy rushed forward, wrapping arms around Lucas's leg. "Did you get the bad guy?" Lucas knelt, the scars on his face softening in the diner's golden light, the scent of vanilla and grease a balm to the night's edge. "Not with fists, son. With truth. Your shout started it, gave us eyes to see clear." He ruffled Ethan's hair, the gesture echoing the club's rough affections, a chosen family expanding in that simple touch. Ryan and Alexander secured the perimeter while Noah uploaded fragments to a secure line, state investigators, clean badges who'd listened to veterans' words over a mayor's bluster. By dawn, Harlan's empire would crumble, exposed in headlines that honored the overlooked, the mill's shadows dragged into sunlight. As the first light crept over the hills, painting the horizon in soft pinks and golds, the Vipers gathered in the lot, engines cooling with sighs of relief. Patrol lights circled town but veered away, Harlan's grip slipping like fog before the sun. Grace joined them, Ethan at her side, her hand finding Lucas's in quiet thanks. "You rode for us," she said, voice steady with the strength of survivors. Lucas nodded. The promise fulfilled, not in glory, but in the redemption of bonds unbroken, scars shared, a child's cry weaving them into legacy. The convoy formed one last time, Harleys rumbling in unison, a thunder of loyalty rolling toward the open road. Ethan waved from the diner's step, his shout a memory etched in their steel hearts, the air alive with the promise of new dawns, justice won, family chosen, honor enduring beyond the shadows. Thank you for riding this road with us. If these stories of grit and heart move you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more tales waiting in the dust. Leave a comment. What's the promise you'd ride for?